Looking at our world from a theological perspective. This is the Theology Central Podcast, making theology central.
Good evening, everyone. It is Monday, June the 3rd, 2024. It is currently 10:13 a.m. Central Time, and I am coming to you live from the Theology Central studio located right here in Abilene, Texas. So, what have you been doing this evening? What have you been doing? Been doing something fun? Enjoying yourself? Having a good time? Have you been involved in deep theological conversations? Maybe you've been listening to sermons. Maybe you've been doing a Bible study, or maybe you've been watching a movie. Maybe you went out to eat. What have you been doing this evening? Well, I cannot speak for you, obviously, because I have no idea what you've been doing. But one of the things I've been doing for the last few hours is doing some of those kind of behind the scenes work on the podcast, right? Those things that most people will never know that you're doing, but it can require a lot of work and a lot of time. Now, if you've ever looked up Theology Central on any of the podcast apps, you may be a little confused because you may say, wait, there's Theology Central and there's Theology Central. You may see the Theology Central with the logo that has the green background, like the little white Bible, and it says Theology Central. I think it's in white letters, right? You may have seen that one, right? And maybe that's the one you subscribe to. If you continue to look on any podcast app, you may see another one that says Theology Central, has kind of the black background, has the microphone. I think it's in, I don't know the color of the lettering. It says Theology Central. I think it's like in a purple, right? It says Theology Central, right? And you may see that one on some of them. Now, the reason on some of the apps, the reason you see two different ones is the one with the green background and the white Bible and the white lettering. That one comes from our podcast hosting site, Spreaker. All right. That feed comes from that one. All right. And that's the Spreaker feed. Okay. And one of the reasons we use that one is because obviously our podcast hosting site, it's set up for podcasts. So it's really easy. Once I set up the account and started uploading episodes, I just go to distribution. There's a drop down menu and it says, send it to Spotify, send it to Pocket Cast, send it to this one, and I just click on it and it's automatically submitted to those podcasting apps. Now for Apple, you have to go in and you have to do it manually. Apple makes it a little bit more complicated and a little bit more difficult, but it's still relatively easy. When you take the link that Spreaker gives to you, you log into the Apple, basically podcast, it's called Podcast Connect, and you just add that link and boom, it pulls in all of your stuff. It looks nice. It looks great. It's got all of the right content. It's got all the right content. It's got all of the right descriptions. Everything looks good and you're set. So that's the one that I spent all the time making sure that it was on. And then sometimes on Spreaker, there's, some podcast apps that are not a part of their distribution menu. So I would have to go to those individually and take the link from Spreaker and submit it and make sure it all works. So I've done that. I've spent, I can't even tell you how many hours going from this podcast app to this podcast app, to this podcast app, to this podcast app, making sure our podcast is available and then trying to download all of those podcasting apps to ensure that it works and looking at it going, okay, I think that looks pretty good. Oh, we need to change that. And I'm always working, always checking on it. All right. Now, the one with the black background with the microphone, I think, again, the purple lettering, I think it's purple. Green with the green lettering that says Theology Central. I don't know where I was getting purple from, but Theology Central, green. When you see that is the feed coming directly from Sermon Audio. That's the Sermon Audio feed, right? That's the one that comes from there. Now, theirs is much more complicated to get it on podcasting apps. Number one, they don't have a drop-down menu that says distribute to all the podcasting apps. They do not. You have to go to each individual one. Well, I have done that. I've taken their RSS feed, their link, and I've gone to the Apple podcasting app multiple times and submitted it and it works. But then I'll go back and check it and it'll be like last update was like May the 5th. And I'm like, well, that's like, 200 episodes that are missing. Okay, that's a little bit of hyperbole, but I'm like, oh, so I have to go into Podcast Connect, hit refresh and do a manual refresh of the feed to pull everything over. Well, it kept telling me, you have to submit the name of the artist. You have to submit the name of the artist. It has to be in your RSS feed. And I'm like, okay, how do I manually go into the RSS feed and edit it in a correct way? I'm not that technical. I don't have that technical knowledge. I can't do that. So today I went back to the sermon audio link and tried it again. And I think it's now working. I think it's ready to go. So now on the Apple podcasting app, you will see that. I try to make sure it's ready to go on Spotify, on some of the others. So now you can choose which one you want to submit to. Now I know ultimately that undermines us having, commercials on our Spreaker feed, because everyone could just go to the sermon audio feed and there are no commercials there. So so that's why the whole having commercials was just kind of a test. And at some point I'll probably just get rid of them, because I'm kind of undermining that anyway, or I'm kind of undermining that whole thing anyway. But that's a whole separate story. So that's what I've been doing, just trying to go and making sure, checking all the apps, making sure it's working. Is the feed being just working on all of it? That's what I have been doing, right? And that's the kind of work that that's the kind of, if you're a podcaster, that's the kind of work you don't get paid. I I can't speak for most. Many podcasters like myself, you're not making any money. You're not getting paid for all the hours of work. And those are the hours of extra work that nobody sees. Nobody even knows it's going on. And you're not making any money. And while you're doing that, guess what you're not doing? You're not creating content. So it's necessary to make sure everything is working. So that's what I was doing. I was doing that, watching TV while I was doing this, watching TV while I was working on it, doing anything else I needed to do around the house. Just kind of this busy work. And then maybe 30 minutes ago, 25 minutes ago, I'm sitting there and I get a notification from an email, all right, for an email. Let me go here to the actual email so I can pull it up. I got an email that said, here's the subject line: new books for your summer reading list. New books for your summer reading list. And I'm like, okay, who sent me a list of books for my summer reading list? I'm like, oh, it's from Christianity Today. It's the Christianity Today Daily Briefing. Publishers' picks for summer reading. And I'm like, okay, let me just look through this really quick. And I'm like, okay, yeah, blah, blah, okay, yeah, okay, blah, 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 blah. Okay, whatever, okay, maybe. And then all of a sudden I get to the very, very, very bottom. The very last book listed. The very last book listed is Proverbs. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. This is the summer of Proverbs, right? We've been talking about Proverbs. I've been doing messages from the book of Proverbs. We've been doing all of this background work on Solomon, Proverbs. Okay, and I'm like, okay, let me look at this book. So I looked and I'm like, okay, what is the name of this book? It's Proverbs, The Blessings of Wisdom by Christopher S. Coopersmith, I think is the name. All right, Proverbs, The Blessings of Wisdom, Christopher S. Coopersmith. And I'm like, okay, let me see if I can find. I didn't even care to read what they had to say about it. I'm like, whatever, I don't care. I got to look this up. So immediately I went to Amazon. All right, and I found Christopher Coopersmith, Proverbs, The Blessing of Wisdom, a Bible study guide journal for, I think it says men and women, all right? So I found the book / journal. I'm like, okay, this looks interesting. I don't know if I want to buy it or anything, but I looked and it said, look inside. And I'm like, oh, okay, you've got my attention. I want to look inside. So I started just, scrolling through it really quick. And I'm like, oh, here's the table of contents. And I'm like, okay, about the book. All right, normal. Sample reading plan. That could be interesting to look at. Community guide. I'm like, tips on how to build community. All right. So this is a small group situation. All right. How to do small groups. Okay. Yahweh, God, Lord. All right. That's an interesting verse. So are they going to deal with the different names of maybe God that's used of God in the book of Proverbs? Okay, that could be fascinating. Okay, maybe I want to get the book to look at that. I'm like, all right, I'm still moving on. Who wrote Proverbs? Okay, that I think most have a pretty good agreement, but all right. All right, next. Who was King Solomon? Okay, that's our background information. Here's a book that's being recommended by Christianity Today for my summer reading list. It's on Proverbs, and they got a chapter on who was King Solomon, and I'm currently doing background work on King Solomon. Oh, they got my attention. Next, how did King Solomon become so wise? All right, well, I think we have a pretty good answer. 1 Kings chapter 3. Okay, maybe. Next chapter. And this is where I stopped. King Solomon's sin. King Solomon's sin. And I'm like, wait. What am I going to do? Here's a book on Proverbs, and they're actually going to address King Solomon's sin. Okay, I've got to check this out. I'm like, okay, I've got to. So I'm like, okay, look inside. Okay, I've got to get down to this chapter. All right, so there's the about the book section. There's the sample reading plan. Okay, I'm like, that's what I was interested in, but I'm like, okay, forget that. I'll come back to that later. All right, community guide. Okay, I don't care about that. Okay, skip that. Yahweh, God, Lord. Okay, that looks interesting. Okay, maybe I'll look at that, but I don't care. Who wrote Proverbs? I think I know. Who's King Solomon? Okay, I think, here it is. Because I was worried that they wouldn't have this sample page in the look inside. This is page 13. Oh, no. Page 13 is how did Solomon become wise? All right. Page 14, I guess. Yeah, page 14. King Solomon's sin. And I was like, I cannot believe a popular level. When I say, this is not some seminary textbook. This is not some academic book. This is just kind of a popular level reading on Solomon. I'm like, okay. I've got to hear I've got to read what they had to say. And so I read it, and then I was like, I got to turn on the microphone and talk about this. Now, here's what I want to do. I'm going to approach it this way, because this is what I always try to teach everyone who listens to this podcast. All of our past presuppositions, all of our past understanding, all of our past learning, all of our past knowing is utterly irrelevant. It's completely irrelevant. It's utterly useless. It's utterly useless when we study today. What you learned yesterday, what you knew yesterday, it's irrelevant. It's utterly useless when you study today. You've got to forget it and put it behind you, right? So I've obviously been studying the Bible for a very long time. I think I have a grasp on Solomon, but you know what? Whatever I knew doesn't matter. It doesn't matter now, because when you are studying now, you don't know anything. You're starting brand new. I know people don't like when I say that. That's the only way to learn. That's the only way to move forward. That's the only way to correct wrong past misunderstanding. You have to move forward that way. So they put forth a hypothesis here that I am going to then ask you to help me either prove or disprove. It is Monday. What we are going to do starting this evening, all tomorrow, and maybe even all Wednesday, our entire focus is to prove or disprove the hypotheses that I'm about to read to you. If it sounds utterly ridiculous to you, or if it sounds completely plausible to you, forget whether it sounds ridiculous or plausible. Just start as if this is our approach. We don't know. Let's find out. And I need you to do all the work you can, and I need you to help me out here, right? Because I want you to see what you can find versus what I can find. The more people participate, maybe the more will the different research, maybe it will lead to conflicting answers. Maybe it will lead to only one answer. It would be great. It would be great if 50 people participated and everyone came to the exact same conclusion. That would be fascinating, right? Okay, so let's start with this. First, the title of this section of this book that's called Proverbs, The Blessing of Wisdom, all right, by Christopher Coopersmith. All right, here we go. Are you ready? Here we go. The title is Kings. They have Kings. I think it would be King Solomon's sin. They have Kings. Kings Solomon's sin. Or does that sound right? Would it be King Solomon's sin? kings? All right. Okay, whatever. Maybe it's a misprint. I don't know. Maybe they know how to write things and I don't. I could be completely wrong. All right, at this point, I don't know anything. All right, but King Solomon's sin. I'm going to read it as King. King Solomon's sin. All right, now, let's stop right there before we even read anything else. I would think that every Christian, even though if you want to try to excuse the sin, you want to try to explain it away, you want to try to say it's not that serious, even Christians who want to do that, everyone has to admit that King Solomon, I think we can at least admit to this. Some people may not even want to call it sin. I think everyone can admit that he was involved in some questionable behavior, right? Right? Polygamy. Hundreds and hundreds of wives. Is that good or bad? Is that right or is that sin? Now, I know what people say. Well, the culture at the time, this was acceptable. Just remember, the minute you say something like that, then when you look around, it's Pride Month, right? It's June. When you look at the LGBTQ world, hey, that's the culture today. Don't condemn it. If we're going to justify the sins of the Bible, because that was the culture at the time, then you've got to justify the sins of the present because that's the culture. You can't play those games. So either polygamy was right or polygamy was wrong. And if it was right, when did it become wrong? Is it only wrong today because states passed laws against it? What if the government said, you know what? We now allow polygamy. Well, then would it be perfectly okay? I mean, those are questions you have, but I think most people at least call into question that polygamy thing may be a problem. All right. Not only was there polygamy, if he has multiple wives and concubines, is that not adultery? Is that not adultery? Over and over and over and over and over and over and over. All right. So you've got polygamy. You've got adultery. What else do we have? Well, he married, not only did he have multiple wives, he married foreign women, which seemed to be a clear violation of, say, Deuteronomy 17:17, right? You're not supposed to be marrying these foreign women because they could turn your heart to their God. Wasn't that a concern? He ended up with a great amount of wealth. Was there at least concerns or prohibitions against the kings amassing such great wealth? Oh, and he ended up worshiping in high places. Was that a good thing or a bad thing? Oh, and he ended up turning to idols and false gods. I think when you start putting all of that together, you may want to try to minimize some of those. You put that together, I think at the very least we should be able to say, well, okay, sin. I think everyone should be able to say he committed sin. Okay? So I'm glad. I was just shocked that they even acknowledged it or dealt with it. But here we go. First paragraph. Unfortunately, Solomon would grow to love women more than he loved the Lord, who bestowed many gifts upon him. He married over 700 women and had over 300 concubines. Some of the women were foreign and worshiped false gods. These sinful relationships would cause him to build temples to false idols. All right. I think that sounds kind of sinful. But let's see what happens. Next paragraph. These affairs significantly affected his relationship with the Lord. Eventually, Solomon's heart was turned away from the Lord and he went after other gods. Towards the very end of life, though, he turned back to serve the only one true God, rejected false idols. Out of grace, God would redeem Solomon, who would go back to believing and having only one wife. Okay, there's a lot there. Okay, so at the end of his life, according to their hypotheses, Solomon did the following things. One, he turned back to serve the only one true God. So you may want to write these down. According to this hypothesis, Solomon, at the end of his life, he turned back to serve the only one true God. Number two, he rejected false idols. Number three, he went back to believing and having only one wife. Those are the three parts of their hypotheses. That when Solomon reaches the end of his life, he turns back to serve the one and true God, the only one true God, using their words to be exact. So let me read that again. Their hypothesis is, number one, at the end of his life, Solomon turned back to serve the only one true God. Number two, he rejected the false idols. So he turned back to serve the only one true God, and he rejected false idols. And number three, he would go back to believing and having only one wife. Three things, again, that they're claiming Solomon would do. I'm just going to repeat these. I know it'll be repetitive, but that's okay, because I want everyone to write these down. At the end of Solomon's life, he turned back to serve the only one true God, rejected false idols, and he would go back to believing and having only one wife. Now, the only support they offer for that paragraph is this, quote, live joyfully with the wife whom you love all the days of your life of vanity, which he has given you under the sun, all your days of vanity, for this is your portion of life, and in your labor in which you labor under the sun. Ecclesiastes 9:9. Now the key phrase there, live joyfully with the wife whom you love all the days of your life. What they're claiming is that Ecclesiastes 9:9 reflects what Solomon did at the end of his life. At the end of his life, he figured it out, and then he returned back to the idea of believing and only having one wife. Now, there's a lot of issues we have to go here, right? Now, when we read the end of Solomon's life, does it look like Ecclesiastes 9? Or are we saying that somewhere at the end of his life, he was writing Ecclesiastes like, okay, on his deathbed or getting close to his deathbed? Then, the last paragraph, they write this. The words and Proverbs are inspired by God to take to heart the wisdom shared by King Solomon himself. Solomon was a sinner just like you and me. Although he failed to serve God with a full heart, he found restoration with God's forgiveness. Now, when they say he found restoration, they're saying he found restoration in this way. He found restoration that he turned back to serve the one and true God. He rejected false idols, and he went back to believing one man, one woman for life. Only one wife. He went back to that. That's the hypothesis. So if he wrote Ecclesiastes at the end of his life, then does that mean he wrote Proverbs when he was worshiping false idols, when he was committing serial adultery and committing serial polygamy and marrying foreign women and amassing great wealth? Is that when he wrote Proverbs? If he wrote Ecclesiastes at the end, are you saying he wrote Ecclesiastes and Proverbs at the same time? Now, there's a lot of pieces of the puzzle we have to put together, right? So we need the date. I'm just give you some research points. When was Ecclesiastes written? Now, when I ask that, you better look in multiple sources. Don't look in one. When was Proverbs written? Look in multiple sources. And then read every account you can find of Scripture. Every account you can find in Scripture of Solomon's the last part of his life, the last section of his life, and look for any scriptural clues where Solomon's like, I'm turning back to serve the only one true God. I am getting rid of, and I reject false idols, and I believe everyone that you should only be married to one woman. Now, I've got 700 right here, and I got 300 concubines, but I'm telling them all to leave. All of you go home. I'm only you right there. What? No, number 10. No, number 30. No, number 50. You stay. No. Number 80. You stay. No, number 452. You stay. No, wait a minute. Get rid of all the wives. I want concubine number 7. I'm going to marry you because you're better than all those wives. In fact, you're the one I wrote the Song of Solomon about. Now, Now you may think I'm being sarcastic, but I am being genuine here. I'm going to throw out any opinion that I have. I'm going to say, okay, maybe because you probably from my teaching that you've ever heard me do on this subject, you probably think that you probably know that at least in the past, I would probably question this hypothesis, if not outright argue against it. But I'm going to say there's a high probability because it's very true. I could be wrong. Look, I've never written a book that's been published. So someone who sat down and wrote a book on Proverbs, it had to go through the publishing, it had to go through the editors. So they write this in just a matter-of-fact way. Hey, when Solomon got to the end of his life, he turned back to the one true God, he got rid of false idols, and he went back to believing one man, one woman. So obviously the editors didn't find an issue, the publishers didn't find an issue, the author didn't find an issue, anyone the author. So there's a high, and I mean this, there's a high probability I've missed it and I could be completely and utterly wrong. And if so, I will need to offer a massive apology and a correction. So that's what we're going to be doing for all of Tuesday. You can start tonight, all of Wednesday. If it takes 2 days, start. You can start with the dating of the books and then look at everything you can find that just seems to describe Solomon's last days. How does it describe them? Now, if, and I'm going to throw this out as like a bonus question. If at the end of your research, you're like, there's just absolutely, there's no evidence for that. There's nothing that would be able to prove that or demonstrate that in any way, shape, or form. If the evidence, let's say the evidence even disproves this hypothesis completely, then here's the question, why is it then that someone would write a book and then try to make this justification or try to make this argument? Why is it that so many times whenever you point out some of their motives or people are like, well, wait a minute. I don't think there's going to be something. No, I don't think there could be something wrong. No, I don't think that's wrong. No, and we always start trying to justify everything they do. Now, are we trying to justify everything they do because we're trying to justify our sin? Are we trying to justify everything we do because we want to believe, I don't know, that they're perfect? I don't know. Now, if we come to the conclusion that they're 100% right, then the question you can ask is, why is the host of the Theology Central podcast been so wrong? And that would be a legitimate question. Have I allowed my own presuppositions, my own prejudice, my own skepticism and cynicism, which I'm very much known for, have I allowed that to infiltrate my hermeneutics? And if so, I'm going to look really, 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 really foolish. And I'm just going to be, right now I'm a little nervous. I'm like, man, I could end up looking really stupid. Summer 2024, I could end up looking like an idiot, and I'm going to have to offer multiple apologies. And maybe at that point I just give up and stop broadcasting. I mean, really, I'm not, you think I'm joking. I'm not joking. I'm really nervous that, like, when I first read that, I was like, wait a minute. If this is true, then I have been so wrong. So you know what you do? When you see something that you immediately may push back and disagree with, you go challenge it. You go study it. You go research it. You go look at it. You don't just immediately reject it. That's what, look, the lesson I want you to get from this is look, there's a part of me that would just be like, whatever. Okay, this book is crazy. Just move on. But no. Immediately my heart starts going, man, what if I was wrong? What if I've been wrong? What if I've been wrong? I'm not going to reject it. I'm going to go look at it. I'm going to go make sure. I'm going to go because you know what's more important? It's trying to figure out the truth, not, I can't be more worried. I should care more about the truth than worrying about looking like an idiot on a podcast where everyone will mock me and make fun of me and send me emails and leave comments saying you're an idiot. Well, okay. Well, you know what? I'd rather be an idiot pursuing truth than someone who pretends they're right when they're not, and you miss out on truth. I would rather look like an idiot pursuing truth than look smart and miss out on truth. All right. Now, this is where I typically would repeat myself again, but I'm not going to do that. Right? I'm going to try to finish. I got like 5 seconds to try to finish it at 30 minutes exact. Okay, it's going to go a little over. Go ahead and I would love to get, if you're going to participate, great. If you get started, great. Send me any notes, any thoughts, any questions, anything you have. Just go ahead. newsif@yahoo.com. newsif@yahoo.com. That's newsif@yahoo.com. That's newsif@yahoo.com. And just quickly, today I saw in the mail, when I checked the mail, that not email, actual physical mail, that one of our listeners from Ohio sent me a check. And that listener from Ohio has been doing that they've been listening to me now. It's got to be 20 years, maybe 15, 16, 17 years. They've been listening to me a very, very long time. And they will send a check sometimes. And what's so awesome is they say, you can do whatever you want with it, whatever you want. And sometimes, like, I remember a couple times they've sent me a check and I'm like, oh no, we got to replace that tire, or we got to get new tires for the car, or whatever. Okay. I will always, email them and go, hey, is it okay if we use it for this? And they've had to say, what do you not understand? I said you can use it for anything, but I always feel bad. Can I use it for this? Or we're going to use it for this, or we're going to use it for this. But that's always really nice that someone listens to the program and then they do that for me, because that just helps with budgets, and it can go to just pay bills, which one of the bills was paying for the internet connection that allows me to broadcast. So it's always grateful for that. So they've been doing that now for I don't even know how long. They've been doing it for a long time. So I owe them a lot for all that they've done. So thank you for that. All right. If you want to look on all the podcasting apps tonight, look for Theology Central, see if you can find the two feeds. The one with the black background, that microphone, and the green lettering that says Theology Central. Where am I getting the purple from? I don't know. And then the green background with, I think, the white lettering. I probably got that lettering wrong as well. That says Theology Central. You feel free to subscribe to both. And there you go. They should be working. You know what you will find. The one from Sermon Audio is almost always way, way, way delayed. At least sometimes for some of the apps, actually, it's pretty fast. But you can, if you care. I mean, you may not even use podcasting apps, but it's just another thing we're trying to do. And I'm still trying to do my best to make sure everything looks good for the Church One app. I'm always trying my best to see what else I can do. And if you go to beta.sermonaudio.com and look up Theology Central, I've tried to make some changes there to make it look nicer as well. So I'm always trying to do what I can. So, you may notice, you may not notice, you may not even care. But it's there. All right. newsif@yahoo.com. newsif@yahoo.com. Our goal is to determine if this hypothesis about Solomon and his sin, if it is true or if it is false. If their hypothesis is true, I have been wrong. If their hypothesis is false, it's not about me being right. It's about what is it in us to try to rewrite these stories or reshape the reality that we read in the Bible to fit some kind of, agenda, narrative. I don't know how you want to describe it. It's almost like there's a psychological obsession to do that. All right. Thanks for listening. Everyone have a great evening, great night, and may God bless you as you dig into these dating of the books and timeline and the chronological order. As you get into all of that, may you learn something, not only academically, but when you look at the end of Solomon's life, maybe it'll be a challenge for all of us. All right. Thanks for listening. God bless.